So let's talk about when the Turks were in Poland butchering thousands of Poles. There was a massacre that the German Reich orchestrated in Poland, specifically in Warsaw, in which in between 40 and 50,000 Polish civilians were butchered. And the Germans orchestrated it, and one of the German SS divisions that was heavily involved in this bloodbath was the SS Der Levanger. The SS Der Levanger literally consisted of people from the crazy houses of Germany. They took all the crazies out of the crazy house and they said, you want to join the SS? Here's some guns. Go out and kill people. But there was another group of Nazi SS officers who also participated in this massacre. These were Azeri Turkish Nazis. Now, I have heard about the Albanian SS Nazis. I have heard about the Bosnian SS, but I have never heard until today about the Azeri SS Nazis who killed for the Germans and who butchered people in Poland. This was a moment in which Turks were in Poland participating in the slaughter of tens of thousands of Polish civilians. Now, I want to take you to the Wikipedia page, and this is for a wiki article entitled Azerbaijani Ss Volunteer Formations. Okay? There is a lot of information in this wiki article. There are a lot of details, which I am not going to completely read because it would take too long. But there are some details that I found really pertinent to this discussion. There are certain details that really do reveal how entrenched these Azeris were in the cause of the SS. So it says here that one of the Nazis who led these Azeris was a guy named Harun al-Rashid Hintersatz. This guy was a German who converted to Islam. His original name was Wilhelm Hintersatz. Okay, this guy converted to Islam and he wanted to lead a Muslim army in a grand Nazi jihad. And it says here, this is the one that I'm most interested in because it actually talks about the Vola Massacre. It says here, on January 29th, 1944, Heinz Rheinefort was assigned as SS and police leader in Reichsgau Wartheland, the pre-war Polish Greater Poland voivodeship, annexed by Germany in 1939. In this post, he was responsible for the organized repression against Poles and other nationalities deprived of all rights by Germany. After the outbreak of the Warsaw Uprising, Rheinefort, I can't read these German names. Rheinefort was ordered to organize a military unit from the 16th Police Company and other smaller security units and head for Warsaw. Upon arrival, his forces were included in the Korpsgruppe von dem Bach of General Erich von dem Bach-Zelewski, who Himmler ordered to quell the rebellion. From August 5th, 1944, Rheinefort's group fought in the Vola area. In several days, his and Der Levanger, all the crazies, Der Levanger's soldiers executed approximately 40,000 civilian inhabitants of Warsaw in what is now known as the Vola Massacre. The Vola killings were mostly inflicted by Kampfgruppe Rheinefort that assaulted the area held by the insurgents from the west. It is hard to determine which specific units are to be held responsible, but the main cleansing tasks had been assigned to Angriffsgruppe Der Levanger with the following forces, I think it should say. So it says here, 2nd Grenadier Battalions 1 and 2, and SS Sonderregiment Der Levanger, all the crazies, and Azerbaijani Ss Field Battalion. Okay, so this word right here, it's difficult to read, but it's quite obvious what it really means. Azerbaijani Ss, okay? Azerbaijan. These guys, okay? Azerbaijani SS Volunteers. So the Azerbaijani Nazis were one of the main forces involved in butchering tens of thousands of Polish civilians. There was another regiment called Ostmusulmanisches. This was another Nazi Turkish SS regiment. So I have never heard this until today. I've never heard about this until today. The Azeris were involved in butchering the Poles. It's very interesting that Poland has a history of fighting the Turks. And here we see in the first half of the 20th century, modern times, here we see in modern times, Turks helping the Germans to invade Poland and butchering tens of thousands of Poles. So this was a moment when the Turks invaded Poland and butchered the Polish people. Now, to be fair, because I don't want to make this out like these Turks are just all evil and they're all monsters. I don't want people to think that, okay? I don't want people to think that I'm just sitting here making it out to be that these Turks are all evil. Because it also says here, and let me just find it. Here it is. So it talks about the different Turkish divisions, and it talks about how there were these different units. So it says here, okay, so the 450th, 480th, 782nd, 786, blah, 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 et cetera, all these Turkish regiments, all these Turkish battalions. Then it says here, many of the volunteers deserted at this time, and the 818th defected to Polish and Ukrainian resistance movements in 1943. So we know for a fact that at least one whole Azeri or Turkish unit, in this case it's the 818th Battalion, defected to fight for the Polish anti-fascist partisans. So it's not like all of these Turks were monsters and all that. A lot of them were. And apparently, I mean, obviously, a lot of them were because of the fact that they participated in the butchering of tens of thousands of Polish people. But what's also disturbing is that they were butchering the Poles alongside the Derlewanger, the SS Derlewanger. And this division literally consisted of crazy people. These were people who were locked up in the crazy houses of Germany. And the Nazis said, hey, you want to be a part of the SS? Yeah, sure. Okay, here's a gun. Go out and kill people. Go out and rape and kill and destroy entire villages. And that's what the Derlewanger did. Now, if you want to see a really good movie that accurately depicts the savagery of the Derlewanger, I recommend that all of you guys watch the film Come and See, which is a film, it's a really a masterpiece of Soviet film. I believe it came out in 1985 or 1984, one of those years. And it accurately depicts how the Derlewanger would have wiped out a whole village. Because in this movie, there is a scene in which a village in Belarus is wiped out by these SS officers, these Nazis. And I did not know this until today, but when the Derlewanger were killing Polish people, one of the groups that was helping them out was a group of Azeri Nazis. So, yeah. I didn't know this. I think this is... it's very revealing. It's very revealing as to the sinister side of Azerbaijan. And I guess you could call this a part 2 of the video I did yesterday entitled Azerbaijan Sucks. And you could add this to the list as to why Azerbaijan sucks, because there were too many Nazis. There were too many Nazis who sided with the Germans. And today you see the Azeris killing Armenians. We saw this last year. We saw videos of Azeri soldiers butchering civilians. I saw this one video, and this one really broke my heart, of an Azeri soldier slowly decapitating an elderly Armenian man who was begging for his life. It was so horrific to watch. Yeah, it was a very disturbing experience. And there are numerous videos like this that you can find online of Azeri soldiers committing war crimes, butchering civilians, sexually torturing POWs. And it really does go to show you that these people really haven't changed all that much. The spirit is still there, lingering about, and we have seen its manifestation. And you see this country which had a lot of people who joined the Nazis, and you see the people of Azerbaijan today supporting the slaughter of the Armenians, and also declaring itself to be an extension of Turkey. Azerbaijan sees itself as an extension of Turkey. There is a saying within the Azeri government and within the Azeri society, when it comes to the Azeri-Turkish relationship, they say that we are one nation, two states. We are one nation, two governments. So the Azeris see themselves as an extension of Turkey. And what did Turkey do during the First World War? We have all heard this. They butchered over 1 million Armenians. Turkey butchered over 1 million Armenians during the First World War. And it was that genocide of the Armenians that would inspire the Germans, because the Germans saw how systematic the Turks were, because they would round up all these Armenians, they would put them on trains, they would make them stop in these little concentration camps, thirst them to death, dehydrate them to death, starve them to death, butcher them in all sorts of horrific ways. And the Germans saw that systematic style, or that systematic manner of executing people in mass, in huge numbers. And the Germans believed that they could take that system and make it even more effective in killing huge numbers of people. And so you see this pattern, you see this connection from the Turks to the Germans, and you see this relationship. The fact that when Germany first became a unified nation, one of the first things that Germany did was form an alliance with the Ottoman Empire in the 1870s. And this alliance still exists. And today you see the Germans still in cahoots with the Turks. You see the Germans giving military technology to the Turks, to the consternation and to the absolute terror of the Greeks, who are very, very worried about Turkish expansion, understandably so. And also, which country in Europe is the biggest impediment to America's conflict against Iran? It's Germany. And for decades, the Germans have served as a hindrance to America's policy against Iran. Every time America wants to sanction Iran, there are the Germans, no, we shouldn't do this, no, it's not a good idea, blah, 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 blah. But the Iranians want to make a nuclear weapon. They want to wipe out Israel. And the Germans say, well, you know, and there was actually a major German foreign policy network. I want to say this was back in the early 2000s. It was from the German, what was it called? The German Council on Foreign Relations. I'm pretty sure that's what it was. And the German Council on Foreign Relations stated that if Iran gets nuclear weapons, this will actually help us as a deterrent against outside enemies. And by outside enemies, I'm guessing the Germans. I mean, if you were to ask the Germans, like, okay, what did you mean by this professionally? They would probably say, oh, you know, we're very worried about Russia or something like that. But because the Germans are always talking about how they're worried about Russia, but the Russians are not an enemy of Iran. So who could they be talking about? Which countries does Iran want to destroy? There are only two countries that I know of that come to mind, and that is Saudi Arabia and Israel. And so the Germans are the biggest European supporters of Iran's nuclear weapons program. And it's very fascinating and disturbing at the same time. It's fascinating in the sense that it really does indicate how a leopard really doesn't change its spots. That the country that, and this is really this is the message that I'm really trying to convey. The country that came the closest to exterminating the Jews is the biggest European supporter today of the only government currently that explicitly makes known its desire to wipe the Jews out. This is something that can't be ignored. The only country in history that came closest to exterminating the Jews, the Germans, they are the nation today that supports the only country that currently, the only country in our own modern times today that explicitly declares its desire to wipe the Jews out. And the Germans are the biggest European supporter of Iran's nuclear weapons program. It's crazy. It really is crazy. But it goes to show you that a leopard really does not change its spots. And today you see the Germans with the Turks, the Germans with the Iranians. It's all there. It's still there. Anyway, you guys just heard some theology. God bless.